Welcome to LunarWhisper. I'll be your storyteller tonight, the voice you hear when the room gets too quiet. Before we begin, like this video and subscribe, so you never miss the things that follow you after midnight. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is, and if there's a story you want next, don't be shy. The shadows are listening. The last day of the year should have felt warm and happy. But for some reason, I kept feeling like something was wrong. The sky looked normal, the streets were quiet, and the houses around me were filled with people preparing for celebrations. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from somewhere close. I was alone at home because my parents went to visit my aunt. They told me to join them later, but I said I would catch up after finishing some work. Now I regret staying alone. The house felt colder than usual, and every room looked darker, almost like the lights were weaker than they should be. Around 6 in the evening, I walked to the living room to turn on the TV. When the screen lit up, I saw something that made my chest tighten. The TV didn't show any channel. Instead, it showed the reflection of my living room, as if the TV was a mirror. I could see myself standing there. But behind me, in the reflection, there was someone else, a shape, a person, standing still near the hallway. I turned around fast, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty. I looked back at the TV, and the reflection was normal again. Just me. I told myself I was tired, maybe imagining things. To calm myself, I went to the kitchen to pour a drink. While I was drinking, I noticed the clock above the fridge. The second hand was moving backward. I stared at it for a long moment, confused. When I blinked, it was suddenly normal again, ticking forward like nothing happened. My hands started to shake a little. I tried to call my parents, but the call didn't go through. The network signal on my phone kept disappearing and returning. I felt a tight pressure in my chest, like the house was shrinking around me. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. No one was supposed to come. I slowly walked to the door, but didn't open it. I just looked through the small glass panel on the side. There was a man standing outside. I couldn't see his face clearly because his head was slightly bowed. He wasn't moving, not even a little. I stepped back, afraid to even breathe. After a few seconds, he slowly lifted his head, and that moment, I felt pure fear. His face looked like mine, but not exactly. It looked older, tired, almost like someone who had lived through something terrible. His eyes were dull, like they had seen things that broke him completely. He opened his mouth slowly, as if he wanted to say something. Before he spoke, the house lights flickered, and the TV turned on by itself. On the screen, I saw the same man, inside my living room, standing behind me. I didn't dare turn around. My body felt locked, like my mind refused to let me move. I could still see the reflection on the TV from where I stood. The man who looked like me was standing very close behind me in the TV screen, even though I felt nothing there. No breath, no shadow, nothing. I forced myself to step away from the door and look at the TV again. The man in the reflection wasn't standing in the hallway anymore. He was sitting on my living room couch, calmly watching me. His hands were resting on his knees, and he had a strange expression on his face, almost a mix of sadness and warning. I whispered, "What do you want?" The man on the couch smiled a little, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It looked tired, lonely, almost like he didn't want to be there either. Then the TV screen changed again. It no longer showed the room. Instead, it displayed a date, January 1st, 2026. Below the date, there was a short sentence, "You won't survive the first hour." I felt my chest tighten as fear rushed through me. I tried to tell myself it was a prank, maybe a virus on the TV, maybe a malfunction. But deep inside, I knew something was wrong, in a way I couldn't explain. The lights flickered again. For a second, everything went completely dark. When the lights returned, I wasn't alone in the room. The older version of me was standing just a few steps away, facing me directly. His breathing was silent. His posture was rigid. His eyes locked onto mine like he had been waiting for this moment. I stepped back slowly, my voice shaking. "Who are you?" He raised his hand slightly, almost like he wanted to calm me. His voice was quiet, steady, and frighteningly familiar. "I came to warn you. New Year's is not what you think it is. Not this year." My heart pounded. "Warn me about what?" He shook his head. "You ignored the first signs, the shadows, the reflections, the clock. They all tried to tell you." I didn't understand any of it. My mind was racing. "Tell me what? What is going to happen?" He looked toward the window as if expecting something to appear outside at any moment. "They're coming," he said softly. "And once the new year begins, they will take the version of you that is still alive." I felt cold spread through my whole body. "Why me?" I whispered. He stared at me with eyes that looked like they carried years of regret. "Because you saw them, and once you see them, you can't escape the night." Before I could respond, he suddenly stepped closer. His expression changed from tired to urgent, almost desperate. "You need to leave this house before midnight. If you stay, you won't be the one walking into the new year." The clock on the wall ticked loudly, and the digits on my phone showed 11:14 p.m. Only 46 minutes left. My voice trembled. "What happens if I don't go?" The older version of me lowered his eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then I become you, and you become nothing." My whole body felt weak, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening before I made any move. "Why are you helping me?" I asked quietly. The older version of me looked toward the hallway, his jaw tight. "Because I know what it feels like to be trapped in this night. And I don't want to see it happen again." His eyes shifted, as if he was remembering something painful. I wanted to ask more, but then the house made a soft, steady vibration. Not a sound, just a feeling, like the walls were breathing. The lights dimmed and the temperature dropped suddenly. He looked at me with urgency. "They're close." My heart hammered so fast I felt dizzy. "Who are they?" He shook his head. "Not people, not spirits, just empty things. They search for moments when time changes its path, and New Year's is the easiest time for them to cross. They look for someone who is alone, someone who notices them. Once you saw the reflection, they marked you." I swallowed hard. My hands felt cold and stiff. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You still have time to escape, but only if you trust me." I looked toward the front door. Leaving sounded simple, but everything inside me felt unsure. "If I leave, will they follow me?" He paused as if choosing his words carefully. "They follow the one who stays connected to this house. If you walk out before midnight, you break the connection." His face tightened. "But if you're still inside at midnight, they will replace you. You won't even know it happened. No one will." I felt my breath shake. The idea of being replaced by something empty made my skin crawl. "Come with me," I said suddenly. "If you're really me, come." He smiled sadly. "I can't. I'm not meant to leave this place. I exist only because you're still inside." The house vibration grew a little stronger. The shadows on the walls stretched unnaturally, like long dark arms slowly reaching. He pointed to the door. "Go now." I hesitated. A part of me was terrified that the moment I touched the door, something would grab me. But staying felt even worse. I stepped toward the entrance. My hands were trembling as I reached for the handle. Behind me, he whispered, "Remember, once you leave, don't look back. They wait for that." I opened the door slowly. The cold night air hit my face. It felt real, safe, normal, compared to the inside of the house. I took my first step out. Then my phone screen lit up on its own. 11:59 p.m. I felt my chest freeze. Only 1 minute left. I walked faster, almost running toward the gate. I didn't dare look behind me. My whole body told me not to. My mind screamed not to. Finally, I reached the street. The moment my foot touched the pavement, the air felt lighter, almost like the night let me go. I allowed myself to breathe. Then from behind me, a calm voice, my own voice, said softly, "Why did you leave me?" My heart stopped. I knew I shouldn't turn. I knew what he told me. But the voice came again, closer this time. Don't leave me here alone. Tears filled my eyes. My legs shook. I closed my eyes tightly, whispering to myself, "Keep walking. Keep walking." And when the clock struck midnight, I kept moving forward. I never looked back. But sometimes, when the new year comes again, I feel a presence behind me. And every year it sounds more like my own voice. The story starts on the last night of the year, when most people are excited and full of hope. But for Mira, that night felt different. She said the air around her house felt heavier than usual, as if something was waiting. Mira lived alone in a small rented room behind an old shop. The shop owner always reminded her to never open the back door after midnight. She thought it was just an old superstition, something harmless. But on New Year's Eve, she finally understood why he warned her. That night, Mira planned to stay up until the new year arrived. She made a cup of warm drink and sat near the small table by the window. From outside, she could hear people talking and laughing in the distance, but around her room, it was very quiet. Too quiet. When the clock reached 11:30, Mira noticed something strange. The back door, which she had locked earlier, seemed slightly open. She remembered checking it twice. She even pushed it to make sure it was tightly closed. But now, it looked like someone had pushed it from the outside. She walked slowly toward it. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept telling herself that maybe the wind had moved it, or maybe she didn't lock it properly. She held the door handle and tried to close it again. Before the door returned to its place, she felt a cold breeze brush against her hand. It wasn't normal cold air. It felt like someone cold had passed right beside her. Mira froze. She didn't see anyone behind the door, but she could feel someone standing very close, as if watching her. Her sight began to blur a little, and she felt her chest tighten. She whispered softly, trying to calm herself, but a sudden thought entered her mind. What if the door didn't open by accident? What if something had entered already? Mira backed away slowly. The room didn't feel like her room anymore. The air felt different, heavier, and she could sense that she was no longer alone. Mira tried to steady her breath as she stepped back toward the center of the room. She looked around carefully, trying to convince herself that everything was still normal. But it wasn't. The small space felt colder, like the temperature had dropped all at once. She reached for her phone on the table, hoping to call someone, anyone. But when she touched the screen, it didn't turn on. The battery was full earlier, she remembered clearly. Now it wouldn't even light up. The room grew even more silent, as if the walls were listening. Mira decided to turn on the main light. Maybe brightness would calm her. She walked toward the switch, and just before her hand touched it, she caught a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye. Someone was standing near her bed. She didn't hear anyone come in. She didn't see anyone pass her. But there, in the dim light, stood a figure facing the wall. Not moving, not speaking, just standing, like it had been there for a long time. Mira's entire body froze. Her throat felt tight, but she forced herself to speak politely, trying not to show fear. "Excuse me, who are you?" The figure didn't move. It didn't even breathe. It just stood there with its head slightly lowered, as if it was waiting for something. Mira felt her hands shaking. She stepped back slowly, trying not to make a mistake. She took a deep breath and said again, "If you need help, please tell me. You're in my room." Still no answer. But then, without turning around, the figure's shoulders rose slightly, like it took a slow breath. Mira felt her heart drop. She couldn't see its face, but she could sense something very wrong, something that didn't belong to the living. The figure finally moved, but only its head. It tilted to the side, just a little, as if trying to listen to something behind it. But there was nothing there. Mira didn't dare move. She didn't dare blink. She felt like the smallest sound from her might make the figure turn around, and she knew she didn't want to see its face. The clock on her wall quietly showed 11:59, 1 minute before the new year, and Mira suddenly understood. Whatever was in her room wasn't supposed to be here until the new year arrived. The minute felt longer than anything Mira had ever experienced. The figure stayed by her bed, still facing the wall, still breathing in that slow, heavy way. Mira's legs felt weak, but she forced herself not to collapse. She didn't know what would happen when the clock reached midnight, but she felt an instinct deep inside her, telling her that she should not stay in the room when it happened. Keeping her eyes on the figure, Mira slowly reached for the front door. Her hand shook as she touched the handle. She tried to turn it quietly, hoping not to disturb whatever stood in the corner. Just as she pulled the door open, the figure finally moved. It turned its body slightly. Not fully, just enough for Mira to feel the cold presence shift toward her. She still couldn't see its face, but she felt its attention lock onto her. Her chest tightened so much it hurt. Mira whispered, her voice nearly breaking. "I'm leaving now. Please stay there." The figure's head lowered even further, as if responding, but not in a way that comforted her. More like it was preparing for something. The clock on the wall changed. 12. The exact moment the new year arrived, Mira felt a pressure in the room, like the air was being pushed inward. The door behind her closed suddenly on its own, even though she hadn't touched it. She heard the lock click. She tried to open it again, but the handle wouldn't move. It felt like someone was holding it tightly from the inside of the room. Yet the figure had not moved from the corner. Mira felt her knees weaken. She turned around slowly. The figure was no longer by the bed. It was standing right behind her, not touching her, not speaking, just standing so close that she could feel its cold presence pressing against her back. Her breath shook as she tried not to turn around. Then she felt it, a quiet, slow inhale behind her ear, followed by a warm breath that didn't match the freezing air of the room. Mira closed her eyes. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She knew she couldn't. The last thing she remembered was the soft whisper that came from right behind her, spoken in a calm, almost polite voice. "Thank you for letting me in before the new year." Everything went dark after that. When the shop owner checked her room the next morning, the door was wide open. The room looked untouched. The only thing missing was Mira. But the back door, the one she swore she had closed, was open again, just slightly. And every New Year's Eve since then, the shop owner says he sometimes sees a quiet figure standing near the wall of that room, facing away, waiting patiently for someone to open the door before midnight. The last day of the year was supposed to feel exciting, but for some reason, I felt a quiet pressure in the air. It was the kind of feeling you notice only when you stop moving. My friends and I planned a small gathering at my cousin's old house outside the city. The place had been empty for months, but we thought it would be fun to celebrate there. The house looked normal from the outside, just a little dusty, like no one had opened the door for a long time. When we stepped in, everything felt colder than outside, even though the weather wasn't that bad. My cousin said maybe the house needed time to warm up, so we just laughed it off and brought our bags in. The living room lights flickered a little, but we ignored that too. We just wanted a simple night with food, stories, and waiting for midnight. But after a while, I noticed something strange. The house felt like it was listening. Every time we talked, there was a small delay in the air, as if the walls were waiting to hear what we would say next. I didn't mention it because I didn't want to ruin the mood. Later, when the others were busy preparing snacks, I walked to the hallway to look around. There was a long mirror standing against the wall, something I didn't remember seeing before. It wasn't dirty or broken, just very clean, almost too clean for an empty house. When I looked into it, I saw the hallway behind me, but it felt slightly different, like the colors were off. I stepped closer, and for a moment I felt like the reflection was a step behind me. Not matching my movement right away, I stood still. The reflection stood still too. But there was something in its eyes, like it knew something I didn't. Before I could look longer, one of my friends called me back to the living room. I glanced at the mirror once more. This time everything looked normal, but the feeling stayed with me, sitting heavy in my chest. That was the first moment I realized the night wasn't going to be normal at all. When I returned to the living room, everyone was laughing and talking, but I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling from the hallway. I tried to act normal, but my mind kept going back to the mirror. I told myself it was probably just my imagination. Maybe the lighting made things look strange, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. As the night went on, the house felt colder. Not the natural kind of cold. This one felt like it was coming from the walls, slowly moving toward us. My friend Dina wrapped herself in a blanket and said she felt like someone was standing close behind her. We looked, but no one was there. She tried to laugh it off, but she didn't sound convinced. Around 10 p.m., the lights dimmed for a second. My cousin said it was probably old wiring, but the timing felt too perfect, like the house wanted our attention. When I went to the kitchen to refill drinks, I noticed something unusual. The mirror from the hallway was now slightly turned toward the doorway, even though none of us had touched it. It pointed directly at the kitchen, as if it wanted to keep an eye on us no matter where we went. I stepped closer to check it. My reflection looked normal at first, but after a moment, I noticed something impossible. Behind my reflection, the living room looked empty, even though I could hear my friends talking from the real living room. The reflection showed only me, standing there, alone. I stared, frozen. My reflection slowly tilted its head, but I didn't move. I felt my chest tighten as I understood what I was seeing. The reflection wasn't following me. It was observing me. I stepped back quickly, and the moment I did, the reflection returned to normal. My friends' shapes appeared behind me just like they should, but I couldn't forget what I had seen. It was too real to ignore. When I returned to the living room, everyone looked at me like they sensed something was wrong. I didn't say anything. I didn't want them to panic. But the house wasn't hiding its intentions anymore. It was showing itself, little by little. Then, just before 11 p.m., we all heard it. The sound of footsteps upstairs, slow and steady, even though we knew for sure no one had gone up there. Everyone went silent. Something was moving in that house, and it wasn't any of us. No one wanted to admit they were scared. But the silence said everything. We stood in the living room, listening to the slow footsteps above us. They didn't rush, didn't pause, just walked from one end of the second floor to the other, like someone was calmly exploring the space. My cousin whispered that maybe an animal got inside, but none of us believed that. The steps were too steady, too heavy, too human. We gathered closer together without even talking about it. The air felt heavier, as if the house was pushing down on us. I kept thinking about the mirror and what I saw. I knew whatever was upstairs wasn't something we could explain. Then, the footsteps stopped. For a moment, the silence felt even worse. It was like the house was holding its breath. A few seconds later, the lights dimmed again. But this time they didn't return to normal. The room stayed half dark, the shadows stretching longer than they should. I felt someone standing behind me. I didn't turn. I was too afraid to see who, or what, it was. Dina grabbed my arm and whispered that we needed to leave. Everyone agreed instantly. We grabbed our bags without caring what we dropped. My cousin tried to open the front door, but it wouldn't move. It wasn't locked. It felt like something was holding it shut from the outside. At that exact moment, I heard a quiet shift of movement from the hallway. I turned my head slowly. The mirror was no longer against the wall. It was standing in the center of the hallway, facing us directly. And in the reflection, all of us were standing there. But behind our reflections, a tall, dark figure was visible. It stood perfectly still, but its presence filled the entire hallway. In real life, there was nothing behind us, but in the mirror, it was right there. As we stared, the reflections of our faces began to change. Our eyes looked darker, our expressions more empty, like our reflections were slowly losing their human emotions. Then the figure in the mirror took one small step forward, only in the reflection, not in the real hallway. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. My cousin and I slammed our shoulders against the door until it finally opened, and we all ran into the cold night without looking back. Even outside, I felt like the air behind us was watching. When we reached the main road, we turned back to see the house. Every single window was dark, except one. The hallway window showed a faint light, and in that light, The mirror stood facing outward, as if watching us leave. None of us ever returned to that house again. And every New Year since that night, I still see reflections that don't move the way they should. I always believed New Year's Eve was supposed to feel warm and full of hope, but last year taught me something different. It was the kind of night when people waited for fireworks, made wishes, and tried to forget everything bad that had happened. But for me, that night became something I still can't explain without feeling uneasy. I was at home alone because my family had gone to visit relatives. I told them I was tired and wanted to rest, but honestly, I just wanted some quiet time. The house felt a bit too silent, and every corner looked darker than usual. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but the signal kept dropping, like the connection didn't want to stay alive that night. Around 11, I noticed something strange. My living room lights started to dim and brighten on their own. I checked the switch, but it was fine. I thought maybe it was just the old wiring, so I tried to ignore it. But then I saw something that made me freeze. Near the window, there was a shape. Not a reflection, not a shadow from the street, but something standing still outside, as if it was waiting for the countdown. I could only see the outline, but it looked like a person facing my house. They didn't move, didn't walk away, just stood there. I tried to be brave and stepped closer to see better, but the moment I did, the shape slowly lifted its head, like it knew I was watching. Even though I couldn't see its face, I felt something heavy press into my chest, as if it wanted to pull me toward the window. I backed away immediately. I didn't know who or what it was, and I wasn't planning to find out. I checked the time again. It was getting close to midnight, and the whole atmosphere inside my house felt wrong, like something was building up to happen. I thought about calling someone, but the signal was completely gone. The clock kept ticking quietly, and I felt this strange tension in the air, as if the new year wasn't bringing hope, but something else entirely. When the clock finally shifted another minute, I heard footsteps on my porch. Slow, steady, getting closer to the door. That was the moment I realized I wasn't spending New Year's Eve alone after all. The footsteps stopped right at my front door. I stood completely still, hoping whoever it was would just leave. But they didn't. Instead, the door handle moved a little, like someone was testing if it was locked. I felt my stomach twist, because I knew for sure I had locked it earlier. I double-checked it before sunset. I didn't dare go near the door, so I stayed halfway down the hallway, watching from a distance. The handle turned again, this time slower, almost patient. Whoever was outside wasn't in a hurry. It felt like they had all the time in the world. After a few seconds, the handle stopped moving. Everything went quiet again. But it wasn't a peaceful quiet. It felt like the air was waiting for the next wrong thing to happen. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it might just be someone drunk from a party, but deep inside, I knew it wasn't that simple. The person outside had been standing at my window long before midnight parties even started. I decided to move to my room, thinking it would be safer there. As I walked up the stairs, I suddenly felt like someone was walking behind me. I didn't turn around, but I felt it. This cold pressure at my back, like someone was following my steps, matching my pace, staying just close enough to make me aware of them. When I reached my room, I shut the door gently and locked it. I leaned against it, breathing slowly, trying to think clearly. My room had always been my safe place, but right then, even the walls felt different, like something unseen was pressing against them. A few minutes passed. I sat on my bed, staring at the door, waiting for any sound. That's when I noticed something even more unsettling. The same shape I saw at the window earlier was now visible through the gap under my door. Not the full figure, just the shadow of 2 feet, standing silently on the other side. I didn't hear the person walk upstairs. I didn't hear the floor creak. Yet there they were, standing right outside my room. The shadow didn't move. The feet stayed in the exact same spot, like the person was listening or waiting. I covered my mouth with my hand to keep myself quiet. My heart was beating too fast, and I was terrified the person outside would hear it. Then slowly, the shadow stretched, as if the person was leaning closer to the door. I could almost feel the presence through the wood, like they were only a breath away from entering. And then they whispered my name, Very soft, very clear, like they had known me for a long, long time. Hearing my name made every part of my body freeze. It wasn't a familiar voice. It wasn't a friend, a neighbor, or anyone I had ever known. The voice was calm, almost polite, like the person was asking me to open the door so they could talk. But there was something underneath that calmness, something cold and empty, like it wasn't a real person at all. I didn't answer. I didn't even move. I just stayed there, hoping the silence would make it go away. But the voice spoke again. This time it said, "It's almost time." I didn't know what that meant, but I felt a deep fear rise inside me. Midnight was only minutes away. Every New Year's Eve, people counted down with excitement. But that night, every second felt heavier, like something terrible was waiting to enter. As soon as the year changed, the shadow under the door didn't move, but the pressure in the room grew stronger, like the air was closing in. I could feel the presence outside my door more clearly, almost like it was leaning against the wood, waiting for the exact moment to cross over. I grabbed my phone again, even though I knew the signal wasn't working. I tried calling my family, but the screen just stayed, frozen on connecting. It felt like the world outside my house had drifted away, leaving me alone with whatever was on the other side. Then the whisper came again, softer this time. "Open the door. Let's welcome the new year together." I shook my head even though no one could see me. I backed away from the door slowly, step by step, keeping my eyes on the shadow. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to move. I didn't know where to go, but I knew staying close to the door was the worst choice. As I reached the far corner of my room, the clock on my table blinked and shifted to 11:59. The shadow under the door straightened slowly, as if the person was getting ready. For the first time, the feet moved, just a small step, but it felt impossible because I hadn't heard a single sound of movement. The second hand on the clock kept ticking. My heart beat faster. The shadow shifted again, and when the clock finally hit midnight, the door handle began to turn. Very slow, very controlled. The lock I had turned myself clicked, not because I opened it, but because something else was unlocking it from the other side. I pressed myself into the corner, frozen in place. The door opened just a little, leaving a small gap, enough for me to see part of the hallway. But the hallway was empty. No feet, no figure, nothing. I stared at the space for what felt like forever, waiting for something to step inside. But nothing moved. Then just when I thought maybe it was over, I felt warm air on the side of my neck, breathing right next to me, inside the room. I never celebrate New Year's Eve alone anymore, and I never will again. The last night of the year was supposed to feel warm and full of hope, but for me it felt different. I remember standing outside my cousin's old house, holding a small bag of clothes, wondering why the air felt heavier than usual. It wasn't cold, but something about the place made my skin feel tight. My parents had gone out of the city for work, so they asked my older cousin, Ronnie, to let me stay with her until they came back. I didn't mind. Ronnie was always nice, even though she lived alone in a house that honestly looked too big for one person. When she opened the door, she smiled, but her smile felt tired. "You came at the right time," she said softly. I didn't know what she meant. At that moment, I just thought she had a long day. Inside, the house felt quiet in a way that made me want to whisper. The lights were dim, and the living room still had old New Year decorations from last year, dusty and faded. I asked her if she wanted help taking them down, but she said, "Leave them. They're better that way." That answer stayed in my head, longer than it should have. After dinner, Ronnie sat with me in the living room. She kept looking at the clock on the wall, even though it wasn't that late. "Do you know why I never celebrate New Year anymore?" she suddenly asked. I shook my head. She took a slow breath. "Something happened 3 years ago. It happened in this house. And every New Year since then, it feels like it happens again." I tried to ask what she meant, but she didn't continue. Instead, she told me I should sleep early. But later that night, when I was in the guest room, I heard her walking around the hallway, stopping in front of my door more than once. She didn't say anything. She didn't knock. She just stood there. I pretended to sleep, but I could feel her watching the door from the other side. And that was the first moment I felt something was truly wrong about spending New Year here. I woke up the next morning feeling uneasy. The house was too quiet again, like it was waiting for something. When I walked into the kitchen, Ronnie was already there, staring at the window even though the curtains were closed. She didn't greet me. She just said, "Tonight don't open your door no matter what happens." Her voice was calm, but the kind of calm that feels forced. I tried to laugh a little. "Why? Are you planning to scare me?" But she didn't smile, not even a little. "It's not me you should worry about," she whispered. The whole day she acted strange, moving things around the house, checking locks, looking under furniture like she misplaced something important. She didn't even eat lunch. In the afternoon, I found an old photo frame on the shelf. It showed Ronnie with 3 friends, smiling on New Year's Eve. But when I looked closer, I noticed one detail. Behind them, in the reflection of the window, there was someone else standing. Someone not in the group. A figure with no clear face, just a dark shape leaning toward them. When I brought the photo to Ronnie, she froze. "You saw it," she said quietly. "I hoped you wouldn't." Then she took the photo from my hand and hid it inside a drawer I had never seen her open before. Around evening, she sat me down and explained what happened 3 years ago. That night, she and her friends had gathered in this same house to celebrate New Year. They were laughing, playing games, taking photos. But after midnight, when everyone else went home, one friend never returned home at all. Her body was found the next morning in front of this house, as if she had tried to get inside. But something stopped her. Ronnie said she remembered waking up that night feeling like someone was standing next to her bed. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly. She said she felt like the same presence has been returning every New Year since then. And tonight, it was New Year's Eve again. Her last words before going to her room were, "Please trust me. When midnight comes, stay in your room. Don't talk, don't answer, don't open the door." I didn't want to believe her, but the fear in her eyes felt real. Too real. As the night grew darker, the house felt colder. My room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were slowly pressing closer. I kept checking the clock, and then, the whole house felt like it shifted. When the clock moved closer to midnight, the air in the room changed. It felt heavier, like the oxygen was thinning. I sat on the bed, hugging my knees, trying to stay calm. Ronnie's warning kept repeating in my head. At exactly 12 a.m., the house went silent. Not normal silence. This was the kind that felt alive, like something was standing right outside the room, listening. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, steady, and too controlled to be random. I thought it was Ronnie, but the steps didn't sound like her. They were heavier, dragging a little, like whoever it was hadn't walked for a long time. The footsteps stopped right in front of my door. I held my breath. A moment later, I heard a voice. Soft, empty, like someone trying to speak after years of silence. It called my name. Just my name. Nothing else. The voice wasn't angry, but it wasn't friendly either. It sounded like someone who knew me, even though I had never heard it before. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to press them against my legs to keep them still. The voice called my name again, a little clearer this time, as if it were learning how to use my name properly. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Then the doorknob turned, slowly. One click, another click. I stared at it, terrified it would open, but somehow it didn't. It stayed half-turned, like someone was holding it, testing it, deciding. After a moment that felt too long, the doorknob released. The footsteps walked away. But they didn't go toward Ronnie's room. They went toward the living room. And then, I heard another sound. This time a voice that was familiar. Ronnie. She was saying something in a low tone, like she was talking to someone she didn't want to upset. I tried to listen, but the words were too soft to understand. The conversation didn't sound like two people arguing. It sounded more like someone trying to convince something not to do whatever it wanted to do. I didn't know how long it lasted. Maybe minutes, maybe longer. Then suddenly the house became quiet again. I waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe more. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. The living room lights were still on, but Ronnie wasn't there. Her phone was on the floor, screen cracked. Her slippers were near the door, but the door itself was still locked from the inside. I called her name many times, but no answer ever came. Until today, no one knows where she went. The police said there was no sign of a break-in, no sign of her leaving the house. It was like she simply disappeared. Every New Year since then, I stay awake the entire night, not to celebrate, not to count the seconds, but to listen. Because sometimes when midnight arrives, I still hear those same footsteps in my hallway, and sometimes the voice still calls my name. That winter was the coldest I had ever felt in my life. The kind of cold that made the air feel heavy, like something was pressing against your chest. I had just moved into a small house on the edge of a quiet town, hoping for a fresh start after a rough year. The neighbors told me the area was peaceful, but there was something about the silence that didn't feel right. Every night the snow seemed to fall thicker and faster, covering everything until the world looked frozen in place. I didn't mind the cold at first, but the nights kept getting longer, and the darkness outside my windows felt heavier than normal darkness. It felt like someone was standing out there, just watching. One night, while I was making tea, I noticed footprints outside on the snow-covered path. They were fresh, very fresh, but they didn't lead to my door. They stopped right in front of my window, facing inside like someone had been standing there for a long time. My heart got tight, but I tried to convince myself it was just someone passing by. But then it happened again the next night. The same footprints, stopping at the same window, only this time there were 2 sets. I didn't sleep that night. I kept checking the window every few minutes, waiting to see something move in the dark. It felt like the cold outside was somehow creeping into the house, even though the heater was on full. I wrapped myself in a thick blanket, but it didn't help. Around midnight, the lights in the house flickered, just once, but long enough for me to feel a wave of fear crawl across my skin. I walked slowly toward the front door to check the lock, trying not to imagine anything waiting on the other side. But when I reached the door, I froze. The lock wasn't just unlocked. The door was slightly open. I stood there, staring at the small gap in the doorway, trying to tell myself that maybe I forgot to lock it. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. I always locked it, especially after seeing those footprints. My hands were shaking as I slowly pushed the door shut and locked it again. The air near the doorway felt colder than the rest of the house, almost as if something had just slipped inside. I tried to calm myself, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I walked through each room, checking every corner, even places I normally ignored. Everything looked normal, but the house didn't feel normal. It felt like the walls were holding their breath. When I reached the living room, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The blanket I had left on the couch earlier was now on the floor. Not just fallen, it was folded, perfectly folded. I hadn't touched it since the afternoon. I backed away slowly, my heart beating so fast I could hear it. Someone had been in the house, and they were quiet enough that I hadn't heard a single step. I rushed to the windows, pulling the curtains aside to check outside. Snow was falling hard, but I could still see the footprints. Only, now there were more of them. Dozens, all facing the house, all pointed toward my windows and door. It looked like a crowd had gathered silently in the snow while I was inside. My phone buzzed suddenly, making me jump. When I looked at the screen, the message made my blood feel like ice. "Why did you close the door?" There was no name, no number, just the message. Before I could react, the lights flickered again, longer this time. The heater stopped. The whole house fell silent in a way that didn't feel natural. It felt like the air itself was waiting. Then I heard it. Not from outside, not from my phone, but from the back of the house. A slow, steady sound of breathing. Inside. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, staring into the dark hallway that led to the back rooms. The breathing was soft, but clear enough to know it wasn't mine. It had a slow, steady rhythm, like whoever it belonged to wasn't afraid. But I was. I tried to speak, but no words came out. My mouth felt dry. My hands felt weak. I took one careful step backward, keeping my eyes on the hallway. The breathing didn't stop. It didn't speed up. It just stayed slow, calm, and far too close. I thought about running outside, but the idea of opening the door again felt worse than staying inside with whatever was already here. The footprints outside, the folded blanket, the message, it all pointed to one thing. Someone had been watching me for a long time, and now they were finally inside. I forced myself to move toward the hallway, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stand the feeling of not knowing. I reached for the light switch. My fingers touched it, but the light didn't turn on. The power was completely out. The breathing grew a little louder. I stepped back again. My phone buzzed in my hand. Another message. "I've been waiting for you to notice me." My heart felt like it stopped. I looked toward the hallway, and in the faint light from the window I saw a shape. Not moving, just standing there, halfway hidden by the darkness. It wasn't tall, but something about the way it stood felt wrong, like it had been standing there for hours without shifting even a little. I took another step back. The shape took one slow step forward. That was enough. I ran to the door, pulled it open, and the freezing air hit me like a wall. The snow outside was deep, but I didn't look back. I just ran, away from the house, away from the footprints, away from the thing that had been inside with me. When I finally reached the road, I turned back once. The house was dark except for one window. My bedroom window. Someone was standing there, watching me. And even from far away, I could tell one thing. They weren't alone. The night before, New Year's always felt special to me. But that year was different. The air felt heavier, like the whole town was holding its breath. I had just moved back to my old family house after years of living away. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet ending to the year. But the house didn't feel empty. It felt like someone had been waiting. I remember standing in the living room, looking at the old wall clock my parents left behind. It had stopped years ago, but that night it suddenly started ticking on its own. I tried to tell myself it was just the cold air affecting it, but something about the steady ticking made me uncomfortable. Around 10 p.m., I heard the front door creak. I thought maybe the wind pushed it, but when I checked, the lock was still in place. The door hadn't moved at all. I stood there quietly, feeling a strange pressure behind me, like someone was standing a little too close. When I turned around, of course, no one was there. I tried distracting myself by making tea in the kitchen, but even there, I felt watched. The hallway mirror reflected something odd. Not a person, not a shadow, just a shape that looked like it didn't belong in the house. When I stepped closer, it faded as if it knew I saw it. By the time it was 11 p.m., I started feeling uneasy in my own home. Every light I turned on felt dimmer than usual, and the corners of the rooms looked darker. I kept telling myself it was only in my mind. After all, it was almost New Year's. Maybe I was just tired, but when I went upstairs, something changed. On the second floor, the air was cold, colder than the rooms downstairs. And then I noticed something that froze me in place. My bedroom door was open. I always kept it closed. Inside, the window curtains moved even though the window was shut tight. And on the floor, right in the middle of the room, there was a small folded note, old yellowish, like it had been waiting there for years. It had my name on it. My hands were shaking as I picked up the note. The paper felt dry and fragile, almost powdery at the edges. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside, the handwriting looked strangely familiar, but I couldn't place it. The message was short, written in simple words. "You came back too late. I already woke up." I felt a chill run through me. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of joke, maybe leftover from when my relatives lived here years ago. But deep down I knew no one would write something like that. Not for fun, not for me. I put the note on my desk and stepped back. The room felt tighter, like the walls were pressing in. The air didn't move, but somehow it felt like something was breathing with me. I forced myself to look around to make sure no one was hiding inside. When I looked under the bed, the dust was untouched. Inside the closet, everything was still, but the feeling didn't leave. It was like the room knew I was there, like it had been, waiting for me to open that note. When I stepped out into the hallway, The house seemed darker than before. The lights looked weaker, almost fading. I walked slowly toward the stairs, but halfway down I paused. Someone whispered my name. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was gentle, like someone calling me from another room. But the voice came from behind me, near the bedrooms. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My whole body felt stiff. I tried to breathe normally, but my chest felt heavy. The whisper came again, a little clearer this time, and I realized something that made my legs nearly give out. The voice sounded like mine. I forced myself down the stairs, step by step, gripping the railing tightly. When I reached the living room, the wall clock was ticking faster than before. Too fast. Faster than any normal clock should. The sound echoed through the whole house. Then, without warning, the clock stopped again. The house felt silent, completely still. And then someone knocked on the front door. 3 times, slow, calm, as if whoever stood outside knew I was alone. And waiting. I stood frozen in the living room, staring at the front door. The knocks didn't come again, but the silence after them felt even heavier. I didn't want to open it, but I also couldn't ignore the feeling that whoever, or whatever, was outside wasn't planning to leave. I took a slow step toward the door. My hand hovered over the handle, but I didn't turn it. Instead, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. I asked who was there. No answer, only the quiet sound of my own breathing. Then something strange happened. The door handle moved on its own, just a little, just enough to show me someone on the other side was touching it. I stepped back quickly, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The handle didn't turn again. It was like whoever was outside wanted me to make the next move. I forced myself to look through the small glass panel on the door. At first, I didn't see anything. The porch was empty. The night was still. The snow on the ground looked untouched. But then, slowly, a reflection started to appear on the glass. Not from outside, from behind me. I turned around fast. No one was there. The living room was empty, but the air felt wrong. Heavy, as if someone invisible had just moved past me. I backed away toward the center of the room, trying to see all corners at once. That was when I noticed the note again. It was no longer upstairs on my desk. It was now on the living room floor, opened, and a second note was placed on top of it, written in the same familiar handwriting. The message was even shorter this time. "Midnight is your turn." I looked at the clock. It was exactly 12 minutes before midnight. The house grew colder, and the lights dimmed as if something was drawing the energy out of the air. In the reflection of the TV screen, I saw a shape slowly forming behind me. Blurry at first, then clearer. The shape had my height, my posture, my outline. It looked exactly like me. Only the face was wrong. Empty, no eyes, no mouth. Just a smooth surface, like a mask that had never been finished. It raised one hand and pointed toward the ceiling, toward my bedroom upstairs. I didn't want to look, but my eyes followed the direction it pointed. At the top of the stairs, someone stood in the dark hallway. It was me. Not the empty face version, a full, perfect mirror of me. Staring down at me with a calm expression, like someone who had been waiting for this moment for years. The version of me upstairs slowly lifted a small old pocket watch, the same one my father used to own. It clicked open by itself. It showed exactly midnight. Then both of them, the one behind me and the one upstairs, smiled at the same time. Only then I realized, in this house, on New Year's, I wasn't replacing my old life. I was replacing myself. My name is Raya, and every New Year, my family follows the same simple routine. We stay home, eat together, watch the countdown on TV, and try to keep things quiet. My parents always say, New Year is not a night to celebrate too much because it's a night when old things walk around looking for places that feel familiar. I always thought they were just trying to scare me. But last year I finally understood why they never liked New Year's Eve. It started around 11 at night. The sky outside was completely silent. No neighbors talking, no kids playing, no one lighting anything. It felt like the whole town decided to hide. Even our house felt different, like the walls were listening to something. My mom kept checking the window every few minutes, even though the curtains were already closed. My dad kept looking at the clock, but not like someone excited for midnight. More like someone waiting for something they don't want to happen. Then 5 minutes before midnight, my phone started vibrating on the table. I looked at the screen, and my heart stopped for a moment. The call said it was from me. Same name, same number, same picture. I stared at it, confused. I didn't touch anything. I didn't even breathe. My mom noticed and asked what was wrong. When I turned the phone to show her, her face changed right away. She grabbed my wrist and said quietly, "Don't answer." But the phone kept vibrating like someone on the other side was getting impatient. My dad locked the front door twice. He told us not to talk until the countdown finished. He said, "Just stay still, don't respond to anything." And then, from outside, someone started knocking on our door. The knocking was slow, calm, like the person already knew we were inside. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to tell me it was just a neighbor or a joke, but both of them stayed completely silent. My mom held my hand under the table. My dad didn't move at all. The knocking came again. This time the person knocked only once, like they were letting us know they weren't going anywhere. Then my phone lit up again. Another call. Same name, same number, same picture. It felt like the person outside and the one calling me were working together. I didn't know what scared me more, the knocking or the thought that maybe the person calling really was me. And then, just 1 minute before midnight, a message popped up on my screen from that same number. It said, "I remember this house." I froze when I read that message. I didn't type anything. I didn't even open it. But I kept staring at the words like they were waiting for me to react. My mom slowly reached for my phone and turned it face down on the table. Her hand was shaking. She whispered, "Don't look at it anymore." My dad quietly turned off the lights, leaving only a small lamp in the corner. The house felt even smaller in the dim light, like the darkness outside was pushing against the windows. The knocking stopped. But now there was a new sound. Soft footsteps moving back and forth across our porch. Not fast, not slow, just steady like the person was thinking or remembering. My dad held his finger to his lips, reminding us to stay silent. He moved closer to the door but didn't touch it. He stood there, listening. His face looked tense, like he already knew who, or what, was out there. Then my phone buzzed again, even though it was face down. Another message came in. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I slowly lifted the phone and turned it over. The message said, "Why did you move the mirror?" My chest tightened. We used to have an old mirror in the hallway. My parents moved it to the attic last year. They said it was broken and not safe anymore. But suddenly I wondered if that was the real reason. Before I could ask anything, another message arrived. "Open the door. I need to come in before the new year starts." I felt my throat go dry. My dad shook his head sharply and mouthed, "Do not touch the door." But the footsteps outside stopped directly in front of it. The house went completely silent, as if it was waiting to see what we would do next. Then from behind the door, we heard a voice that sounded exactly like mine, calm, patient, like it had been practicing. "Raya," it said, "I know you're awake." My mom pulled me closer, holding my arm so tight it almost hurt. My dad, quietly, backed away from the door, his eyes wide. He whispered, "It's not you. No matter what it says, it's not you." But the voice outside spoke again. "Raya, open the door. I'm cold." My heart dropped, because I noticed something. The voice didn't sound far away. It didn't sound muffled by the door. It sounded like it was speaking right next to my ear. I turned my head slowly, afraid of what I might see. But there was no one there. And then, before I could move, a new message appeared on my screen. "I'm already inside." The moment I read the message, every hair on my body stood up. I didn't move. My parents didn't move. It felt like the whole house stopped breathing. My mom whispered my name, barely audible. Raya, don't look around. Stay still. But how could I not look? Someone, or something, had just said it was already inside. My dad walked toward us slowly and carefully, like he didn't want to disturb the air. His voice was low. Stay close to me. Do not separate. I held my phone tightly. My hands were shaking. My screen was still open to the message. The words felt alive, like they were watching me. I locked the phone and tried to calm myself, but my heart was pounding so loudly I was afraid whatever was in the house could hear it. Then we heard footsteps from the hallway. Not from the door, not from outside, from inside the house, steady, familiar, almost matching the rhythm of my own steps. My dad slowly moved us backwards toward the living room wall. He kept us behind him, his arms slightly spread as if trying to shield us. He whispered, "Don't answer it. Don't talk to it. It can't do much if you ignore it." But then the footsteps stopped right behind the couch, right behind me. I felt something cold brush the back of my neck. Not a hand, not a breath. More like the air itself changed shape for a moment. I wanted to scream, but my mom grabbed my hand tightly and shook her head. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Just wait until midnight passes." But midnight was only seconds away. My phone lit up again. I didn't want to see it, but the light reflected off the wall. The newest message had just 3 words. "Look behind you." My heart almost stopped. I kept my eyes forward. I didn't dare turn around. My dad took a deep breath and said quietly, "Don't look. Whatever happens, don't." But then the lamp in the corner flickered, and for a split second, I saw a reflection in the glass cabinet across the room. It was me. Same face, same hair, same clothes. But the reflection was smiling in a way I never smile, and worse. The reflection wasn't copying my movements. It was waving, slowly, like it was greeting me after a long time apart. The clock hit midnight. The lights went out. Everything became silent. When the lights came back on a few seconds later, the hallway was empty. The porch was empty. The house was normal again, except for one thing. The old mirror we kept in the attic was now standing in the middle of the living room, clean, bright, and facing directly toward me. There was a handprint on the glass, a handprint that looked exactly like mine. The last week of December always felt a little strange in my hometown, but that year was different. People kept saying the air felt heavier, like something was waiting. I didn't really believe anything supernatural, but even I noticed how quiet the neighborhood had become. No kids playing outside, no neighbors chatting, no music from the houses. It was like everyone was holding their breath. I lived with my older cousin Maya. She was usually cheerful, but lately she looked tired and nervous. She kept checking the windows at night and making sure the curtains were fully closed. When I asked her what was going on, she just said, "You'll understand on New Year's Eve." Her voice sounded too calm, like she was trying not to scare me. On December 30th, something strange happened. Our neighbor, Mr. Harris, knocked on our door. He looked pale and sweaty, even though the weather was cold. He asked Maya if she had seen anything near the backyard last night. Maya didn't answer. She just shook her head and closed the door quickly, then locked it twice. I tried to ask her again what was happening, but she just said, "Ignore everything and stay inside after sunset." That night I woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen to get water. When I passed the hallway window, I saw something in the distance, near the tree line behind our house. It looked like a person standing very still. I thought maybe it was just a shadow, but the shape was too clear. A tall figure, facing our house, not moving at all. I wanted to call Maya, but something inside me felt frozen. I just stared at it for a few seconds. Then the figure slowly lifted its arm and pointed directly at our window. I stepped back without thinking. My heart felt cold. When I blinked, the figure was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. On the morning of December 31st, Maya finally explained. She said every New Year's Eve at the last hour before midnight something comes through our town. She didn't know exactly what it was, only that it chooses someone each year. Nobody talks about it because talking about it makes it stronger. The only rule, she said, was never look outside between 11 p.m. and midnight. I thought she was joking until she showed me the list. A handwritten list kept in a drawer. Dozens of names. Names of people from our town who disappeared exactly on New Year's Eve over the last 20 years. The last name on the list was handwritten in a shaky style. It was my name. I stared at my name on that list for a long time. My hands felt weak, and for a moment, I wondered if this was some kind of prank. But Maya's face told me everything. She wasn't joking. She looked like someone who had been preparing for this moment for years. She told me the list wasn't hers. It belonged to our late uncle, who used to live in this house before us. Each year, he wrote down the name of the person the presents pointed at. He claimed he could feel it. Choose, the way some people could feel a storm coming. Maya found the list after he died, and she added the next names based on what she saw or felt. But she never told me why my name appeared before this year even happened. When I asked her, she just whispered, "It chose you, months ago." That afternoon, the whole street felt emptier than usual. Some houses were already boarded up. Others had their lights off even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. People avoided eye contact, walking fast, shutting doors behind them as if they were afraid time was moving too quickly. Around 5 p.m., Maya started covering all the windows with thick blankets. I helped her even though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. She kept saying the same thing. "No matter what you hear, no matter what you think you see, stay away from the windows." Her voice was calm, but her eyes kept shifting to the clock. As night came, the house felt unusually cold. The kind of cold that stayed under your skin. We sat in the living room with all the lights off, just a single lamp in the corner. Maya handed me a cup of warm tea, though I barely tasted it. At 10:40 p.m., something changed outside. The air became still, completely still. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant cars, just silence. Maya grabbed my wrist. "It's starting early this year," she said. At 10:55 p.m., the quiet was broken by something gentle but unnatural. A soft knock on the front door, so light that it almost sounded polite. We froze. The knock came again, light, slow, patient. I whispered to Maya, asking if it was a neighbor. She shook her head and mouthed, "Don't speak." The knock stopped for a few seconds. Then it started on the back door. Same gentle rhythm, as if something was walking around our house, trying each entrance one by one. At 11:03 p.m., the knocking stopped. For a moment, I thought maybe it had gone away. But then we heard footsteps on the porch, slow, dragging footsteps, moving along the wall, stopping right beside the covered window. Maya closed her eyes and held her breath. I felt something inside me, an urge to look, a strong, uncomfortable feeling, like someone was calling me silently, like my name was being pulled out of my mind. Then a voice spoke from outside the window, a calm voice, a familiar voice. It was my mother's voice, even though she had been gone for years. It said my name softly, asking me to open the window, asking me to look. Hearing my mother's voice shook something deep inside me. It wasn't just similar. It was exact. The tone, the softness, the way she used to say my name when waking me up for school. For a second, I almost stood up without thinking, but Maya grabbed my arm so tight her nails dug into my skin. She shook her head, with a terrified expression I had never seen on her face before. Her lips trembled as she whispered, barely audible, "That is not her." The voice outside kept calling me. Patient, gentle, warm. It told me it was cold outside. It told me it needed my help. Then it said something that made my whole body freeze. "I've missed you since the night I left." My mother had died in an accident. No one had been with her. No one knew her last words. But this thing was pretending to. The lamp in the corner flickered. The air in the room became sharp, like tiny needles brushing my skin. I felt a pressure in my chest, as if invisible hands were pushing me toward the window. Then the voice changed. It dropped the kindness, dropped the warmth. The next time it called my name, it sounded flat and hollow, like someone learning how to speak by copying old recordings. Too smooth, too steady, wrong. It didn't sound human anymore. Maya covered my ears with her hands, but the voice slipped through anyway. It whispered directly inside my mind, not outside the house. Look at me. I already chose you. My vision blurred. The room tilted. I felt myself leaning forward before Maya pulled me down to the floor. She held me tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. Her voice shook so much I could barely understand the words. The blanket over the window began to rise slightly, as if something outside was lifting it with invisible fingers. Slow, careful, almost curious. Maya crawled over and pressed her entire body against the window to keep the blanket down. She whispered, "Don't look. Not even once. It only needs one moment." I sat on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. The blanket shifted again. This time it lifted higher, just a little, enough for a thin line of cold light to slip in. In that thin line, I saw a shadow, tall, too tall, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if its neck had never been meant to bend that way. It stayed perfectly still, but I felt it watching me, studying me through the tiny gap. I couldn't see its face, but it felt like it was smiling. Then everything happened at once. The lights in the house went out. The lamp burst. The entire window shook like something slammed against it, not with force, but with excitement. The voice filled the whole house now, echoing everywhere. "It's almost midnight. Open your eyes." I squeezed my eyes shut and covered my ears. But even with my eyes closed, I saw something, like a shape, burned inside my mind. A face too long, eyes too dark, skin too pale, stretched thin like wet paper. It whispered again, "If you don't look at me before midnight, I will come inside next year." The clock struck midnight. The house became silent. The pressure disappeared. The cold faded. The voice stopped. When we finally uncovered the windows, the outside was calm and empty. No footprints in the snow, no shadow near the trees, nothing. But when I checked the list the next morning, a new name had been written under mine. The handwriting was shaky. It was Maya's name,